Thank you, Joe. Some of you are smiling. I'd have to tell you, for a long time, when I would talk with people like you, people weren't smiling. I've been in this field about 35 years now. It wasn't until the late 90s that people like you began to be polite to me. Nobody wanted to hear about mixing mission with money, which is what social enterprise is all about. You're in the right place if that's what you were here to talk about. And I wanted to give you a sense that I've been around for a while, and this is me at the age of 19, back in 1964, and I have a checkered career, so you're going to have to make your own judgment about whether what I have to say today has any value whatsoever. I have a very useful graduate degree in comparative literature, in ancient and modern drama. I was a Peace Corps volunteer, living, believe it or not, in a village named Nirvana for 2 years in northern India. I was a journalist, which is where I learned to be a skeptic for 11 years. I tried and failed 5 times to start small businesses. Fortunately, I succeeded twice along the way. I was a corporate executive for my sins for 6 years. I had a long period of time as a nonprofit executive. I've spent the last 12 years running my own institute. So in a sense, I've spent a lot of my life trying to go from doing good to doing well to doing good to doing well, and I finally found a way to pull them all together, and have spent the last 30 to 35 years talking about social enterprise. We didn't even know what it was called in the beginning. I didn't pass out any handouts, but any of you who would like a complete set of these PowerPoints, you just write to that email address at the very top, jerr@orbis.net. I'm leaving for South Africa tomorrow to participate in the 4th World Forum on Social Enterprise, so I will be back for a couple of weeks, but when I get back, I will send anybody who asks a PDF version of all the slides that I'm using today, plus perhaps a few more. And you can get more information by going to my website or to the website of the Social Enterprise Alliance, which is the largest membership group for social entrepreneurs in the United States and Canada. Okay, let me start with a few stories. And let me begin with a woman some of you probably know because she's from California, Mimi Silbert at the Delancey Street Foundation. Anybody know about the Delancey Street Foundation? Some of you? Okay. Back in the 1970s, Mimi and her 2 10-year-old sons and 10 ex-convicts all moved together into a 1-bedroom apartment. And they started something called the Delancey Street Foundation. And over the years, they have graduated more than 10,000 former prostitutes, drug addicts, and former convicts back into mainstream society. People come to Delancey Street, they stay for 2 to 4 years, and they work in 3 different businesses, and they learn how to become productive citizens. It started with about $1,000, and they got that $1,000 from a loan shark. That's how they began their organization. It's done some phenomenal things over the years, and today runs about a dozen different businesses, social enterprises that employ people from target populations. I'll come back and talk about that some more. John Durand, the fellow in the middle there, 1968 had $100, and he had 14 individuals who were developmentally disabled between the ages of 18 and 24. 7 men and 7 women. By the time he retired in 1997, he had built it into almost a $70 million business, and only 1.5% of it came from grants. All the rest of it was from earned revenue. And lastly, the folks over here on the right, Hugh Westbrook and Esther Cauliflower. In 1978, he's a minister, she's a nurse. A member of his congregation comes to him and says, "My father is dying. It's a very undignified process. Isn't there something we can do to make this better?" So they set up a bed in the basement of the church, and they started doing what was called hospice care. It had just come to the United States from the UK a couple of years before. Today, this little nonprofit that started is now a for-profit company. It's a $700 million business. It's the largest end-of-life care organization in the country. All of these things started from very small kernels. The global face of social enterprise. It's all over the world. Just quickly, let me show you a few. You know about Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. He said you walk out of the classroom where he'd been teaching as a professor and you see people dying all around you, so what do you do? And what he does is he creates the Grameen village in 1976 with $27. He gave total loans to 42 women without collateral in a male-dominated Muslim society and created something called the Grameen Bank, won the Nobel Peace Prize, and by now billions of dollars have gone out to millions of people worldwide with a 95% repayment wide rate, and microfinance is everywhere around the world. Or less perhaps massive, a young woman named Albina Ruiz who comes out with a graduate degree in industrial engineering with ecological and environmental management, and she looks around Peru and realizes that garbage is money because 75% of the garbage in Reno gets thrown into the rivers and the dumps. And there it is, and the families prowl through the garbage looking for items that they can resell. She said, what can I do about that problem? So she created a new community-managed system of waste collection, then a landfill and waste treatment plant. Then she created dozens of small businesses to recycle it and collect it and transport and sell it. Within 3 years, every one of the businesses became self-supporting, and the model is being replicated throughout South America. One woman did that. One woman did that. One guy in India came out of graduate school and he said, I had two choices. Can I get rich or can I help people? Those are my choices. What am I going to do? He decided to help people. In India, subsistence farming, 3 months of rain, millions of migrant workers, generation after generation after generation, no permanent homes, no education, no secure families, children aren't being educated. He wanted to create agricultural entrepreneurs, and he did it by creating an affordable drip irrigation system where the power of $1 becomes an amazing thing because you use $1 to irrigate a small plot of land, you sell the vegetables that you don't eat, you buy a larger piece of land, $1 becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, $1 turns into $50,000. They now have 2 million farmers generating $600 million in revenue. They provide education for the kids, better housing, better clothing, better health, local distribution centers across India. They're in other countries, they're moving into Africa. One guy did that, one guy. But it's not always just an individual. Sometimes it's a corporation. Vestergaard Fransen has as its company mission humanitarian responsibility. These are the folks who invented the malaria bed nets that you hear about all over Africa. They played a key role in eradicating guinea worm disease. They also developed the protective sheeting when there's a disaster that you prevent the spread of contagion when a disaster occurs. And they have also developed what Forbes calls one of the 10 things that are going to change the way we live in the 21st century. How many of you have heard, aside from the 17 I told about it yesterday, how many of you have heard of the life straw? A couple people, that's good, 6 or 8 people have. It costs $1. You can dip it into any bit of contaminated water in the world and you can drink through it and it removes 99% of the contamination and it's reusable. And that's their business. That's a for-profit, major international corporation running a social enterprise. And my heroes, the hero rats. How many of you know about the hero rats? The hero rats were created in Belgium by the Belgian government and a bunch of scientists. And they trained sniffer rats to detect explosives and to diagnose diseases. They started with landmines because these sniffer rats are not heavy enough to trigger the landmines, but they can identify them and find them, and then the humans can go out and disengage the landmines. They got the initial financing from the Belgian government because they can trace the vapor coming off of the landmine with their sniffer mechanism. And today, believe it or not, they have been trained to sniff out tuberculosis. And the same thing is happening all over the world. Chief scientists developing this sort of thing. Dogs were the only other alternative to rats, but they weren't as good because rats have so many different advantages over dogs for doing this kind of work. Okay. I'm going to tell you some examples of these folks as we go through the rest of the morning, because I want to focus now on the face of social enterprise here in the United States. So here's what we're going to do, or try to accomplish this morning. I'm going to give you some definitions, because right now you're all wondering, what in the world is he talking about? What is this social enterprise stuff? Okay? Then I'm going to talk about the industry as it exists today, the single greatest challenge for nonprofit organizations that want to start social enterprises or start generating earned revenue, the 3 types of social enterprise leaders, the reasons to do this, the projected outcomes for it, some basic principles, and critical success factors that the pioneers in the field have really shared with me over the last 3 decades. So let's start with some definitions. That's the traditional model for a nonprofit organization. That's the business model, right? Depending on the kindness of strangers. And here's the way it works. You start with a mentality that's based on philanthropy and government subsidy. Believe me, I have nothing against philanthropy or government subsidies. That's just not the world I live in, okay? I'll come back to some of that. But that's where the traditional mentality begins. You take all the various business functions of governance, strategic planning, marketing, R&D, human resource development, and volunteers, and you sift through all of that and go out and do some fundraising from private contributors and from the public sector so that you can run your programs, right? And if you need more money than you can raise, you might sprinkle a little earned revenue over the top. But the engine that drives all of this is charitable contributions, volunteerism, philanthropy, in order to carry out your mission, right? That's the dependency model. And year after year, you go back and start over again to try to raise enough money to survive another year. There are 2 other models that have emerged. And the first one is the sustainability model, the one I believe every single one of us should be pursuing. It's a model that says you can fund the future of a nonprofit through a mixed revenue stream, a combination of earned revenue with charitable contributions and public sector subsidies.